Kathy Krause, and I'm the labor liaison at the law firm of Fine, Olin & Anderman. This morning we have Fine, Olin & Anderman's partner, Vincent Rosillo, who specializes in workers' compensation law, and he has graciously joined us. So thank you for taking the time out to join us this morning. Just a couple of quick questions about workers' compensation law. When does someone actually qualify to file for workers' compensation?
Well, let me just start from the beginning and saying, especially during these very serious times, we've been getting a lot of phone calls and emails about workers' compensation. So it is a lot more complicated than people think it is. So you should definitely speak to a lawyer, and you can contact us for more information, and we'll give you our contact information at the end of this video. But generally speaking, under the law, you need to have had an accident that arose out of in the course of your employment.
Okay.
Or you could have suffered an occupational disease, which is something that happens to you over the course of time. If you have one of those situations, either an accident or an occupational disease, you should file a workers' compensation claim with the state of New York.
Okay, so what is the time frame for filing for a work-related accident or occupational disease?
So if you had an accident, you have to give notice to your employer within 30 days of the notice.
Okay.
If you have an occupational disease, you have 2 years from the day you knew or should have known it was work-related to give notice to your employer. Even if you've retired or moved to a different state, you still have 2 years from the day you knew or should have known to notify your employer. Those are just the notice requirements. In addition to that, you must file a claim with the state of New York, the Workers' Compensation Board itself. You have 2 years from the date of the accident, and in an occupational disease, you have 2 years from the day you knew or should have known your condition was work-related to file the claim with the state of New York.
So when you say give notice, how does one formally give notice? Is it written? Is it oral?
It can be either. We recommend that you do it in writing, where you do a written report and you give it to your supervisor, but it can be oral.
Okay.
If you decide to do it oral, you should keep a note of when you gave notice, who you gave it to, and if there were any witnesses that were there.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about some commonly asked questions regarding workers' compensation. So if I were to go to a doctor, does it have to, and be evaluated, does it have to be a regular doctor, or does it have to be like a workers' compensation doctor to formally start the process?
Well, if you have an emergency situation, you can go to the emergency room of any hospital. You can go to a treat and release type facility. So for that first visit, it doesn't have to be a workers' compensation approved doctor, but for those subsequent visits, you should see a doctor who accepts workers' compensation because they're more familiar with the process, they know what forms to file,
Okay.
and they know the wording of the reports. So we highly recommend that you go to a doctor who accepts workers' compensation, but you don't have to,
Okay.
especially initially.
Okay. And when I do visit the doctor for treatment, once I receive workers' compensation, do I have to pay a copay? Is there a deductible? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, one of the benefits of workers' compensation is the medical benefit.
Okay.
And the highlight of that is that it's illegal for a doctor or a medical provider to take money from you in a workplace situation. So you walk into the doctor's office, you walk out without paying. There's no copay, no deductible, there's no lifetime cap on how much is spent on your medical coverage.
Okay. So if I'm out of work due to a workplace accident or occupational disease, what happens with my lost wages? Like, how am I compensated?
Under the law, there is a 1 week waiting period. So if you're out of work for less than a week, you don't receive any benefits. But if you're out of work more than a week, starting on that 8th workday, you are entitled to benefits. And if you're out of work 2 full weeks, that waiting period is waived and you get it from day 1. And you would receive 2/3 of your average weekly wage with certain maximums depending upon the date of your accident. And you receive that benefit per week while you're out of work.
Now, are your workers' compensation checks taxed, or are you responsible to pay for the tax on them?
Workers' compensation is non-taxable, so it's a tax-free benefit.
So if I were to, let's say I was driving to work one morning and I got into an accident, would that be something I could file for workers' compensation for?
That's a very complicated question, Kathy. You shouldn't ask questions like that on video. So I can't answer that. Generally speaking, driving to and from your workplace is not work-related, but there are many, many different exceptions to that. So you should definitely contact us so we can go over the details with you.
Okay. Can my employer make me use my FMLA time while I'm out on workers' comp?
So FMLA stands for the Family Medical Leave Act, and if you do qualify for it, yes, your employer can make you use that time while you're out of work.
Okay. And now let's say if I was, this is a question I've been commonly asked actually while at events, if I had a heart attack or a stroke while at work, is this something that I can file for workers' compensation for?
Again, that's a complicated question. General answer will be yes.
Okay.
But it's very, very fact specific, so you should definitely contact us. The fact that you already had a heart attack or you had pre-existing symptoms does not preclude you from filing. A lot of people think, oh, well, he was a heart attack waiting to happen. He smoked, he was overweight, he never exercised, he was going to have a heart attack anyway.
Sure.
But that's not what the law says. If something at work made you have that heart attack at work, it could be work related.
Okay. And now we've spoken about like medical benefits, financial awards with workers' compensation. Like, can you tell us anything else about workers' compensation that people should be aware of, what they're entitled to?
It's again a trick question, Kathy. So we have discussed the monetary benefits, we've discussed the medical benefits. People should be aware that if they suffer a permanent injury to a limb, an arm, a leg, a finger, or a toe, they may be entitled to a settlement for the permanent loss of use of that limb, even if they didn't miss any time from work at all. And if they have a permanent disability where they could never go back to work, they may be entitled to weekly benefits for up to 10 years if they have a permanent partial disability. And if it's a permanent total disability, they could get it for the rest of their life.
So if someone's having a problem filing a workers' comp case or they're having trouble receiving their benefits, what should they do?
I don't think you should start the process on your own because it can get very complicated. We have to remember that workers' compensation is a no-fault system, and we don't care about whose fault it is, but it is what we consider an adversarial proceeding. And by that I mean there is always someone on the other side, whether it be the employer or the insurance company, who is trying to look very closely at your case and trying to limit the extent of their liability. So I think at the outset, you should contact a lawyer. And remember, there's never an attorney's fee unless you receive an award. So if there's no award made, there's not an attorney's fee. And those fees, just to be clarified, are set by the judge, and they're 10 to 20% of what you receive. And the judge decides the amount of the fee based upon the services that we rendered on your behalf.
Right, so if anyone has any questions or if they want to have their case evaluated, they can contact us, right, at our 1-800-522-9001, or just log on to our website, www.foalaw.com, for further information. So
That's correct, Kathy.
thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.